Hello, everybody. Hi, good morning, good evening, depending on where you're coming from. Welcome to Core Web Vitals and the Roadblocks to Success. Please use the chat function to say hi, let us know where you're coming from. I'm in the UK, so Steve, Riley's in the US, so we've got a whole load of stuff going on today. Hi, Jeannie from Minneapolis, amazing. Ethan from Tampa, hello. British Columbia, lots of people in the States, exciting. So it's all early morning for you guys, I think. So it's more like 6 p.m. tea time for us over here. Orange County, Southeast London, woo, in London, another one of us, brilliant. Seattle, so many people, welcome. So I'm just gonna say hi for a few minutes, make sure everybody has plenty of time to get into the room and tune in. Oh, from Brazil, hello. I don't know what the time zone is over there. Could be any time between the morning and the evening. New York, very exciting. Fantastic. So yes, welcome. Oh, Germany as well, amazing. So this is, as I said, Core Web Vitals and the Roadblocks to Success. My name is Paige. I am the SEO team director at a company called Roast. I am obsessed with SEO, absolutely love it. I've been working in SEO for almost a decade now. And one of my colleagues made me optimize myself for the term the SERP features lady. So you might see me if you search for that term. Absolutely obsessed with SERP features. They're my jam. Speaking at Brighton SEO about SERP features if you want to tune in. But that is enough about me. I will hand over to the wonderful Riley.
Hi, everyone. My name is Riley Irvin. I am the content marketing and SEO manager at 1-800-Accountant. So I work in-house. Before that, I worked at an agency as well. I have about 5 years of SEO experience under my belt. My favorite thing about SEO would be, I do content marketing, so I got to plug the content, keyword research. I love all of that stuff. I live in Seattle, as you said. I moved here recently, and I live with my cat, who may or may not make an appearance here. But that's enough about me. I will pass over to Steve.
Yeah, well, my cat has just appeared right on cue. Thanks,
that was
Keeper.
Perfectly timed.
Yeah. My name's Steve. I'm the head of technical SEO at Spike Digital and a cat owner, as you can see. I've been working in technical SEO for just over 10 years now. And before that, I was a web designer and developer, but not really that good at website design. So I quit that and just concentrated on SEO. So I've worked at Spike for 4 years. Before that, worked for a couple of the other agencies in and around Leeds in the UK, which is a great place for this particular industry. And before that, I was a teacher for 7 or 8 year olds, primary school. Poor kids. So, and the cat's back. So before the cat jumps on the laptop and destroys everything, I will see if I can share my screen and just jump into 2B slides. Is it going to work? Let's see. Technology at its best.
Here we go.
Can you see that? Is that all up
indeed.
and proper? Excellent. So yeah, Core Web Vitals and the Roadblocks to Success. So it's my view really on why Google are introducing the Core Web Vitals and where I think perhaps they've kind of fallen a bit short of what I was expecting. And I'll start off with that kind of what Google is doing and why, and then move into kind of an overview of each of the Web Vitals, so the largest Contentful paint, cumulative layout shift, and first input delay. So it's going to be quick, about 15 minutes. So let's start. So in May, I believe it was, Google came out with this announcement. Don't worry, I'm not going to read through all of this. I'm just going to try and break it down for us. So the reasons why they've said they're introducing Core Web Vitals is that looking at page speed and a lot of the reporting and the metrics, there's such an abundance and wealth of them that it can become overwhelming, and that makes it inaccessible to a lot of people. So what Google is saying is, with these Core Web Vitals, they want to simplify the landscape which I think is really good. I think we've needed a bit more hand-holding from Google when you've got all of these metrics. Which ones should we look on? So it's focusing on what matters the most. So I think that's a brilliant start. Now, Google have said explicitly that these will impact on keyword on search rankings, search results. And that's where my interest comes in, because I'm involved in technical SEO, getting back traffic and better rankings for my clients. So how much is it going to impact? Well, thankfully, Google have been out on Twitter answering a lot of questions about this, and they've said it's not going to be a primary ranking factor. That really still falls to the highest quality content and being relevant to results for users. And Core Web Vitals has nothing to do with either of those. So where does Core Web Vitals really fit in? It's in and amongst all the other technical fixes that we would look at. You know, when I do an audit at Spike, we look at duplicate content, things like that. So I would put it kind of on a par with all of those kind of issues. It's not sort of a be-all and end-all of your website, so don't get led astray by anybody who's telling you that it is. That's my opinion anyway, and I think it's backed up here by Google. So I think we'll talk more about that in our Q&A session. But let's just jump into the first of the Core Web Vitals. So largest contentful paint. This has been around for a while, but now it's been highlighted by Google. What do we mean by largest? That's the amount of space it literally takes up on the screen. Okay, so we're talking about screen real estate. Now, hopefully, a few of you are going to have seen these examples that Google gave us when they released their statement about this. I'll just run through this one quickly. So it's a frame-by-frame loading of the page, and Google have highlighted in these green boxes what the largest item on the page currently is in each frame. And you see by frame 2, we've got this heading, and that gets replaced in frame 5 when this image is loaded in. And this page is sort of fully visibly loaded at this point, and that's the largest contentful paint, or the LCP. So it's that image. It replaces everything that had gone before it. Now, is frame 5 good? So we'll look at another example from Google. See here a different page, and in frame 2 you have this paragraph of text. So it's a block of text, and that doesn't get replaced. So even though images load in later, they're not as big an individual item as this block of text. So this particular page achieves the loading of the LCP by frame 2, which is obviously better than the previous example. And if we look at this in a real world setting, this example from the watch shop, the timeline, which I've sort of truncated here, it's that 3.9 seconds. You can get this timeline out of webpagetest.org. I think it's a really useful tool to be seeing what is going on, how your page is being loaded over time. And you can see here, I'll highlight with green boxes, just as Google's done. You've got this title for the Gucci watch. That would be the LCP in those first 3 frames. But then you get this image pop in. And this is going to be the case, I think, for a lot of e-commerce websites. It's really natural to put that image first and foremost. But you look in this example, they don't achieve that before 4.2 seconds. And to get a good score for LCP, you need to do it in 2.5 seconds. So if I was Watch Shop, I would be trying to preload this image or get the scripts that are calling it, because it's dynamic content, to do that earlier. See if I can achieve it in under 2.5 seconds. So that's an example of LCP and where one website is struggling. Here's another example that I think is really going to affect lots of websites. Looking at the Racing Post, you might not be with your eye be able to determine what is going to be the LCP for the page, but it's this cookie pop-up, which so many websites have now. And the problem with cookie pop-ups is that they almost exclusively load as the very last item. So everything else is rendered on the page, then the cookie pop-up happens. And this gives the Racing Post a really bad score. I think this is Lighthouse report, 17 seconds. And I'm not sure if I entirely trust, in fact, I don't trust in that time frame. But I'll come on a bit more to how much I trust in the tools in a moment. But because this cookie notification comes in late, that's going to give the Racing Post a poor score. So one thing to look at if I was a Racing Post, well, when it comes to blocks of text, Google looks at paragraphs, individual paragraphs. If this is one paragraph, they could split this into 2 paragraphs, and maybe that would mean that the cookie notification would no longer be the LCP. But they'd have to play about with it, or maybe just reduce some of the text. But this, I think, is going to trip a lot of people up because it's so commonplace. Talking about how much I trust in the tools, when I've been researching this, I've found a lot of problems. This Metro desktop view, for example, when I look at Chrome DevTools, so Google are telling us to use Chrome DevTools to find out about your LCP, and it detects the Metro logo as the largest item on the page, and that's just nonsense, quite frankly. This advert image is certainly bigger, and every single tool that Google are telling me to use seem to be blind to adverts, which I don't think is good. I don't think that's helpful at all. And then this image at the bottom of the screen here, that's certainly larger than the logo, and none of the tools that Google are asking me to use actually identify this image, which is one single image, as the LCP. And I think that's the way that it's being loaded into the page. And I've been on webmaster support forums and Twitter and the like. And at the moment, the answer is we're not sure. So if I can't trust in the tools, that makes it quite difficult for me. So I would give Google a performance score of 67 out of 100 for this. I really like LCP. I think it's simple enough for people to understand and access. But in terms of the tools that we've got and how we can interact with that score and try and change it, I don't think it's as polished as it could be. But it's still a good start. So moving on to cumulative layout shift. Now, this is something that everybody will have experienced. It's when things move around on the page, and you might not be able to keep up with it. So here's an example from Hello Magazine. That page looks perfectly fully rendered, and maybe I'm about to click on one of the articles in that sort of middle strip, and then suddenly you get a space appear above all the content that has already been loaded that shifts everything down, and that's layout shift, and one of the worst examples of layout shift. And it's caused by an advert. And I think the websites that have a lot of adverts on their site, they're going to be impacted on this, potentially more than most. It's really frustrating for the user because you're about to click on something and it moves. Again, I would say the best place to go and really look and research your websites, your client websites, would be through Web Page Test, because that gives you a chart that shows you the layout shifts over time and this timeline, so you can see exactly where it's occurring, which is really, really useful. If we go back to the watch shop example, so we know they're already having a bit of a bad day with largest Contentful paint. Well, let's look at layout shift now. So as the page is loading, we've got all of this information about the watch name, about the price, and so on. And when that image loads in, well, that's going to shove everything that we've been looking at out of view. So that's a huge amount of layout shift being caused by the late loading of this image, which again is a problem for the LCP. So it's kind of a double whammy for them, something that they really need to sort out. And I think probably my go-to solution for layout shift would be similar to this example that I've got from Lad Bible. So this page, this screenshot is from, the page hasn't fully loaded yet. You've got this grey box that's under the navigation. And an advert is going to go in here. And what they're doing is they're reserving the space for that advert. And they do it just by using CSS. They know the minimum height that they need for their advert, 250 pixels. So they use CSS and they essentially block out that area so that the article below it can't load up any higher. So that article, when it's loaded, is not going to be moved around by a late loading of an advert. And this, like I said, would be my go-to solution, probably even for Watch Shop, because if you know the dimensions, if you know how big your product image is going to be, then you could reserve that space. So you can entirely eradicate layout shift because of that image using this kind of practice. So for layout shift, I would give them a slightly higher score of 79. I like the fact that Google have brought layout shift sort of into all the other metrics that they've got. They've never really talked about it too much before. It's always kind of been for UX people to look at, but I like the fact that they're highlighting it now. Again, I think without webpagetest.org, we could be a bit lost in trying to analyze it. I'd like to see the tools a bit more polished so that we can really dig into this and fix websites a bit quicker with good tools. And finally, we have first input delay. So first input delay, again, people are going to experience this from time to time on the internet. When you click a button or when you try and interact with a website and nothing happens, it's very frustrating from a user point of view. The way I try and explain it to people, it's like phoning up customer service and you get put on hold. And the reason why you've been put on hold is because the customer service operator is already dealing with a different request or a different customer. And it's very similar for your browsers. So when you click and nothing happens, your browser is already trying to, it's already dealing with a different request, probably something to do with JavaScript. That usually is the biggest offender. So Google's example, and it's not very visual, I'm afraid, but you've got this main thread. So this is the browser processing different elements of a page over time. And it's busy during these periods, these sort of yellow blocks here. So if I click or you click at this period where the browser is currently busy, then you have to wait until it has finished with that particular task, and then it can respond. And first input delay is the amount of time it takes for the browser to finish that task and then respond to you. So the interesting thing with first input delay is that this can only be measured with real life users, because when I click or when you click, that will be at different points in time. So you need real live data to actually analyze your site, unlike Cumulative Layout Shift and largest Contentful Paint. There's 3 tools that you can access that data from. So Chrome User Experience Report, PageSpeed Insights, and Search Console will report on first input delay. And I give you data like this, which is, I think this is PageSpeed Insights. So it's 28-day aggregated data. I don't like first input delay because I think it's really difficult to engage with. It's not a new metric. I've found a lot of sites that have got stuck with it in the past and haven't been able to really deal with it. What I'm finding is that most websites score very well, so it's not a problem for them. But if it is a problem for your website, then the place to go and look would be in Chrome DevTools. And you're looking at data like this, so the performance report within DevTools, where you've got all these scripts that are running, and you need to try and identify which one's taking a long time and potentially blocking the browser from responding to a user input. I would say that this gets really technical quite quickly, unlike the other 2. And because I don't like it, I'm going to give Google a score of 16. It's nothing new. People who were stuck on it before will still be stuck on it now. I can see why they've included it, because it is one of those really annoying things that happens as a user. But I don't think that at the moment they've really improved how we can access and make changes to a website to improve scores on that. So just to wrap up, I'd like to get back to a previous point about how important are core web vitals. I think a lot of people will be receiving emails about, oh, your core web vitals are really bad, buy our service now. As Spike, we think, yes, they're going to be important, but we're going to put them alongside so many other of your technical fixes. It's just one element of technical SEO. So, don't panic over these, certainly have a look at them. But your content might not be up to scratch. You might need to get more products on your website, whatever it might be. And that may be a better place to focus your time. So that's me just kind of summing up. So back over to you, Paige.
Thank you so much. That was so interesting and really, really helpful. And I think firstly, being able to interrogate Google's new metrics like that is so important, because a lot of the time you think Google, they are in charge of everything. What they've given us must be very important, but actually everything with a pinch of salt. Do these metrics actually help you? I mean, Riley, have you had any communication from your colleagues or from potential agencies to say, oh my God, these are really important, you should do this right now?
No, everyone in the industry I've talked to is like, yeah, this is cool, it's a nice tool, but as far as it rolling out in SERP, we're not necessarily confident it'll change all that much. It'll kind of just be another tool in our belt to make sure that the content is make sure that the pages are ranking as they should be.
Absolutely, I completely agree. And at least two of those metrics are just speed metrics. Like speed is something that we've been talking about for forever and a day in SEO, making sure your site is fast. I think these two new metrics, LCD and first input delay, they're helpful, potentially making speed a bit more accessible via Search Console. I agree with you, Steve. They're okay. I do think you've scored CLS quite low, although based on all three, it was quite high.
It's my favourite because, like I said, I don't think Google have really talked about layout shift very often in the past. We've always been aware that it's a UX issue. Yeah. And the one sort of commonality between all the core web vitals is that they are user-centric. So that's why maybe time to first byte or those kind of metrics haven't made it in. These all frustrate users more so than others. So I really, applaud them for bringing that in. And I would score it higher, but I'm so reliant at the moment on web page test. And sometimes I've got into a queue of over 1,000 websites on that. And if I've got a time scale to work on, now how do I audit that site properly to find out what's going on? So, I'd love a better sort of page speed insight, something that would highlight what's forced layout shifts and when it's happened. And, Google have said that they've got 6 months at least before this is really introduced. Maybe they're going to use that time to give us new, shiny, reliable tools. No.
Yeah, I probably wouldn't hold your breath. But, Awesome. So we've got a couple of questions on CLS. So firstly, is there a way to specifically tell on my page what is causing CLS? Riley, Steve?
I would, like I say, I would look in specifically. No, there doesn't seem to be. If you use web page test, then you can break down the timeline into, so I think it's 0.1 of a second. So you can get a lot of frames out, and it gives you a chart of when it detects them. So you go and look up as closely as you can to that frame, and it will show you visibly. But sometimes, because the screenshots are very small,
Oh my
it's
God.
very
The traces.
difficult to,
Why are they so tiny? Traces on all tools are like that big. Oh,
yeah.
nightmare.
And that, sometimes it's obvious. So with adverts, I think you get
Yeah.
massive space, or with that example from the watch shop where it's quite clear this image is like just shoving everything out of the way. So then you can go and say, okay, well, when do I load that image in? How do I load it in? And how can I give it a higher priority? But outside of that, I think DevTools now has layout shift built into it. But that doesn't always seem to turn up on mine. Again, it's like, where is it? It's there for one of my sites. It's not there for another site that clearly has layout shift. What's going on, Google? I'm not happy about that.
Yeah, sometimes I've seen the big red bar in Chrome DevTools where it says this is where CLS is happening, and you can match that up with the trace with those frames in Chrome DevTools and say, okay. We had a session with a client where we opened up all the tools and we were like, right, Search Console has said we have CLS on these pages. Let's grab some of the pages that are on different templates. Let's put them through PageSpeed Insights. Let's put them through webpagetest.org. Let's have a dig through. And some of them we were able to be like, okay, it's that. I think it's either Lighthouse or PageSpeed Insights where it will give you the file name of the thing as well. So that meant nothing to me for this particular client, but one of the devs was like, oh, okay, that's the header and footer. On this template, we have a piece of JavaScript which says load that at this time, but we don't have that on that template. So we'll just implement that. Like, oh, cool. Okay, quick fix. Easy. Let's do that then. Yeah, but it is a challenge right now. The tools aren't perfect.
Yes, and I think it will be obvious to some people when they're looking at their site. I think again with those kind of cookie displays, the ones that shove everything down from the top, that's almost like loading an advert in above content. And I think people just need to say, oh, okay, we'll just do it from the bottom instead. And there you go. The problem for that will be solved. So some of it will be simple, and then some of it will be like, I don't know what the heck's going on here.
Absolutely.
And it'll become dev heavy then.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure one of ours was a cookies pop-up, which you then like, I'm just going to take the hit on CLS because actually this is fine. I'm sure this is fine. It's a cookies pop-up. Most people won't see this. And we'll see if that becomes an issue down the line. Riley, do you have cookies pop-ups on your site?
No, so we haven't really run into that as an issue across the board. We run into some other issues. Sometimes things like one of our big issues with Shift is that when we load videos, they load in late. So that can kind of move around our content. So we have gotten pinged for that, but it's not cookies.
Nice. Yeah, which is actually interesting. We've had a question in from Andy Simpson. Do you see common on-page elements that affect core web vitals, such as banners and things? And I think you've already captured images, videos, cookies pop-ups, obviously ads. Mm-hmm. Anything else you guys can think of that might cause, or any of the issues, really, I guess?
I would say so images. Images can be if you don't optimize the image well, especially for LCP, then that can be a bit of a problem. I think if depending on what kind of website I was working on, if it was a news sort of website, I might start leading with more blocks of text content because text is just super quick. So why have like a featured image that's pushed all the rest of your content down? Why not put in your heading, a good paragraph, introductory paragraph, and then put your featured image in under that? And I've seen some websites do that really well. Gives them a brilliant score for LCP. But in terms of kind of common problems, then I think it is. Anything that is delivered via a script so adverts are a big offender because that all gets called late in the day. But also, looking at that watch shop example, because it's a dynamic content that's been built, they need to look at how early they're calling that image and dealing with that quicker, because their scores for those two metrics, I think, are very poor. And if they've got a good dev team, they should be able to do that. So that's the most kind of common thing. I think a lot of images in blog posts or whatever are probably fine. You're looking at 2.5 seconds. So most web pages quite easily hit that.
Nice. Riley, have you had any issues with your sites with any of the Chrome Web Core Web Vitals?
I mean, yeah.
All of them.
Yeah, basically all of them. But our biggest one is the largest Contentful paint, for sure.
Oh, interesting.
We don't have a lot of layout shift on our site, except for the pages that have video. That can be a bit of an issue, but for the most part, it's what's loading when. Because we also have a lot of JavaScript on our site, which can really slow things down. Yeah, I know.
SEO faux pas.
I know, the site's old,
Awesome. And have you found the Search Console interface for these elements helpful when talking to non-SEOs?
Yes, to a degree. I think that particularly the graphs are super helpful, because it really breaks things down in terms that I can sometimes be a little too highbrow for. When I'm talking to the higher ups in the company, it's easier to be like, look, we have this many really bad URLs that we need to fix. Whereas if I'm just over here talking about LCP or CLS, they're going to be like, why does that matter?
Yeah, exactly. Look, the red line's gone up. Awesome. So we had a question about, it's kind of a pet peeve of mine as well, but when you're looking into the Search Console data, you only get a small number of pages. You only get a sample set. If said, is this to do with a bandwidth issue for Google Search Console? I mean, I would say probably, because they don't want to give you all of that data. But what do you guys think?
I would say most data in Google Search Console is limited to 1,000 rows. So I think it's probably stems from that. Why they wouldn't give us more examples, I don't know. But it frustrates me that whilst it might list the page, it doesn't actually tell me what the heck the problem is. It doesn't say it's because of this file or this image or whatever, and I can go and look at it. And I go and look at a page and I don't know. Yeah, you haven't helped me. You've told me you don't like them, but you've not helped me identify what the problem is. So I think it's just Google reporting that they limit the amount of things that they will tell you about.
Yeah, interesting. So another interesting question that I hadn't thought about was, are carousels considered CLS? And I would have thought as long as it doesn't shift during that load time, you would be fine. But I don't have many clients with carousels. Do you guys? No.
Not really.
In theory.
There is some information about carousels on Google's announcement about Core Web Vitals. I can't for the life of me remember what the answer is to that. So that's not very helpful. Sorry, everyone. But if you go to Google, they will tell you the answer. No, I can't remember.
I would assume as long as it's not shifting during that load time, that if it automatically shifts, that it waits until the site is completely loaded, that you should be fine. Also, if it's a user interacted carousel, so it won't move until someone clicks it, Google shouldn't see it move either.
Yeah, I think it comes under, so layout shift is all about unexpected layout shift. So it's when something moves, you're like, well, I wasn't expecting that to happen. So a carousel, you are expecting it to move. And equally, if you click on a button to open up a drop down, then that would be an expected shift in content. So it's when something happens and you just weren't expecting it. It's when something gets injected in, like an advert, shoves everything else out. So I think carousels are safe. Don't particularly like them myself, but if you like living in the 90s internet, then that's.
Fair enough. Awesome. So one more question from Dan Goldberg. Is there a difference by the viewer's device type? So would you prioritize these for mobile or for desktop?
So yes, there is. When you go into the Core Web Vitals report, mine in particular has a big difference between what shows up on desktop and what's on mobile. And I was actually surprised at how different the scores were between the two. So that's definitely worth looking into. As far as what to prioritize, I'm always going to say mobile because mobile first is rolling out. But I don't think it's worth neglecting desktop. Steve, what do you think?
Absolutely, it's mobile and desktop. It's different screen sizes. So in DevTools, you can select, Pixel 2 or responsive or iPhone or whatever, and you might find that you're receiving more layout shift or what have you, depending on individual devices. And Google Search Console, obviously, that reports on desktop pages and mobile pages, and you can see a big difference between the two of those. So you look at that watch shop, for example, if you're looking at it on a desktop view, you'd have the image over one side and the text over the other side. So that image is no longer shoving everything down. So you've instantly fixed that on desktop by not doing anything at all. So definitely need to look at both areas. But as Riley said, if I was going to choose one to prioritize, it's very unusual these days that I look at desktop first. Everybody's using mobile.
Controversially, though, I would say check your GA data, because I don't know about you guys, but we've seen a huge increase in desktop traffic because we're all working from home. We're less on the move. We're not doing as much. Suddenly, desktop is just as important, if not more important, than mobile for some people. So just double check if mobile first is still really important, but just double check.
Really good point. Yeah.
And I guess while we're on the topic of mobile, one thing I want to ask is about Core Web Vitals impacting AMP, a personal topic of mine that I quite like to talk about, but I'll get your guys' opinion first.
I think AMP pages will potentially still be impacted by this. They shouldn't be, because everything should be super quick and delivered by Google. But a lot of pages featuring adverts, and I don't think that those adverts are delivered via AMP. So it's still going to have a bit of an impact, but it's a very interesting topic. I know that you have some very clear thoughts on this page.
I do. I personally absolutely hate AMP. So for anyone watching, I've always advised clients not to use it, mainly because I don't have any news publishers. So obviously that is a different situation. But every single time a client of mine has tried AMP, it has gone horribly wrong, and their rankings have dropped. They've not been able to track it properly. One particular favorite story of mine is having this situation with one client where we tried it didn't work, we rolled it back, and we tried it for a good time as well. And then a different client of mine had has gone into them and used the original client as a case study to tell my other client that they should do this thing. And I was like, it didn't work. Don't do it. So I hate AMP, but you should all enjoy it. And apparently it's dying soon anyway, so it's fine. Riley, have you used AMP at all?
No, not on our current site, so I can't really speak to this.
That's the correct
answer. I will avoid it. Thank you.
I'll defend AMP a little bit. We have had we've had one client not in the news sector who went onto AMP, and they did get a lot of traffic. It did cause us quite a few problems. It's never an easy thing to introduce, especially with tracking and things like that. But it was quite good, and we are encouraging a client that we're working with at the moment who are very much in that news, sort of live data, want to be in the news stream and everything else. And a lot of their competitors have AMP, and it is the AMP pages that get featured. So I think from a news point of view, that it's still going to be quite a useful thing to get into. But with regards to core web vitals, I think you test them as well. You have to test those AMP pages separately because they're being delivered in a slightly different way.
Yeah, completely agree. Absolutely. So we've had an interesting question from Ethan. What's the best way to format and share Core Web Vitals issues with developers? So from my experience, because these are quite new metrics, I created a meeting with my client developers where we already knew that we were taking these metrics with a pinch of salt because they're new, so we didn't want to panic. And we came at it from a very collaborative approach. So we went through the metrics, pulled out some pages, dug into the data of it all together, because they know things that I don't, I know things that they don't, and that's how I approached it. And we ended up prioritizing based on what they knew they could fix and what stuff that was going to be quite difficult to fix. We've kind of put a pin in for now, and we'll come back to that if Chrome Web Vitals becomes a bigger deal, really. How about you guys?
I'd honestly take the same approach, where I would spend a lot of time with the developers and do exactly what you were talking about, figure out what would be easy to fix and what if we removed might be detrimental. Like, for example, I mentioned we have JS script on our site, and we use that with our ads when we're running like A/B tests. So I can't necessarily remove those things, even if they are negatively impacting our core web vitals. So I would definitely take a very collaborative approach, see what you can fix and how it will affect everything, what you can fix fast, and then just keep testing.
Yeah, I think with it being new, it's interesting. The best thing, like you both said, is really to talk to the developer, to the interested parties, not make a huge deal out of it to begin with. I've just been auditing a site. We had a phone call. They have advertising on their site. So, for example, that Lad Bible example that I gave, where this is a way that you can reserve space on your site. Is this a solution that you might be able to look into? And they're just going away and looking at it. There's no urgency at the moment because we've got at least 6 months before this kicks in to being a ranking factor. But we're trying to use that time wisely, and we'll work through it together. And then when they've come up with a solution, I'll steal it from their devs and give it to my other clients as well. So that say, here's a fix that we managed. It's really good.
Classic agency. Nice. So have you started using that Chrome Web Vitals in your tech audits already?
Yes, because we know that it's coming in. And like I said at the end of the slides, we're not saying, right, you need to deal with this now. But just like if they've got a really poor server connection time, we would highlight that. It's like, we know Google are talking about this, and it's not often they say, hey guys, we're going to do this. We're giving you notice. They rarely do that. So kind of thinking that, whilst I'm downplaying it, that Google are taking it quite seriously. So it's like, well, we know that this is going to happen in 6 months to a year's time. Why not sort it out now? And things like LCP have always been a part of your Lighthouse report. So in a way, it's just moved into a different section of our technical audit. So good to look at it now, and just so that we're using the time that Google have given to us, but definitely not saying, oh look, your web vitals, they're terrible. Give us lots more money, and we'll sort them out for you.
Yeah, that classic agency cold calling of, oh, your scores are terrible. So do you think each of the vitals gets the same weighting? Yeah, no, I think CLS is slightly more important.
There's actually CLS. So because they're now in Lighthouse Report, and Lighthouse Report does have a weighting system, and I'm not certain, because Google, when they launched Core Web Vitals, they didn't say if any one of them was going to be more important than the other. But if you run a Lighthouse Report and you click on the weightings of that, I think CLS is 5%, whereas first input delay is 15 or 25, and it's really kind of like, because I hate that, because I hate first input delay. It's the last one that I want to be looking at and trying to fix. It's a dev nightmare, I think, that one. So whether the Lighthouse weighting is going to be Google's eventual weighting for these, we don't know. But I wouldn't be surprised if they weren't weighted all, the same. We shall see.
That's interesting. I did not realize that was 15% versus 5%. I would have thought layout shift was hugely more important to users than that. But I guess, like you said, speed has been an important part of this for a long time. And I guess, look at Lighthouse. It literally tells you which things are going to save you the most time and flags the highest value things.
Yeah.
Really, do you use Lighthouse a lot where you are?
I haven't, but as far as the weighting goes, I mean, I'm with you guys. I think that it wouldn't surprise me if they were all weighted differently as they're rolled out. I bet that one of the reasons that they haven't necessarily told us what the weighting is yet is because they're still waiting to see how things roll out and what the bugs are. Because like we talked about, one of the issues can be, your cookies pop-up flags these, and I wonder if Google will ever be able to fix that, and if it will change the weighting of those particular scores that are getting flagged, because it'll be such a common issue.
Yeah. Do we think that we're going to get like CLS proper penalizations coming through?
I don't know. I hesitate to say that'll happen, because I feel
don't say the P word. Scares people.
I think it'll definitely affect your ranking if a ton of your pages have CLS on them, for sure. But I don't know that you'll necessarily get penalized for it, because it's not like a black hat tactic.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just if your website is poor, they won't want to rank you as much, but it's not like you're going out of your way to cheat Google in some way, and that's where the P word comes up so often. So yeah, definitely. I think you'll get those error messages from Google Search Console saying, 300,000 of your pages have got poor LCP. But in terms of penalties, I don't think we'll get any of that.
Good. That's good. So hopefully no penalizations for anybody on any of this stuff. Although I did like the Google's example of you go to go back and you end up buying 72 of something. I feel like maybe that's a tactic for not better rankings, but at least more revenue. Don't do that though, guys. Don't do that. Awesome. So done Web Vitals weighting. So do you think this will make the page speed insights report obsolete? I think that this makes it even more important. What do you guys think?
I agree. I think they should definitely be used in conjunction, because as Steve kind of talked to, the tools themselves are kind of flat when you go to actually diagnose the issue. So my gut would be to use everything kind of together to see what commonalities you can find to even diagnose the issues in the first place.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I use the webpagetest.org as you suggested, Steve. Lighthouse, of course. I think GT Metrics is another one that we use. I've used something called Varvy, which is really good, quite user friendly. There's so many page speed tools out there.
And I think as well that the other metrics that are all in Lighthouse or Web Page Test, so time to first byte, they're all still relevant. So even though Google has said, we're going to simplify the landscape, you only need to look at these three. Well, the more I look into it, the more I think, it's a bit of nonsense, really, because if your time to first byte takes 2 seconds, then that 2 seconds influences the 4 seconds to load in your LCP. So to actually fix the loading in of your LCP might be sort out a problem with your server not responding to requests as quickly as it should do. So you're almost back at square one. But it is a move in the right direction. But yeah, you can't just ignore all the other bits and pieces that we've been trawling through over the last few years with Lighthouse Report. They're still going to be very valid.
Absolutely, completely agree. Completely. Riley, do you use any other tools?
I mean, not for page speed necessarily. My favorite tools are SEMrush and Ahrefs. I don't know if I can even say that here.
Well, you just did.
SEMrush. Definitely use SEMrush.
SEMrush. No, but for page speed, I rely pretty heavily on both page speed insights and the Core Web Vitals.
Yeah, I've always said to clients, look, we'll start with Google's own tools because that's Google's opinion on what's more important. We'll use these other tools as well because they might actually be more helpful and flag different things and give things different weightings. But we'll start with Google's opinion since, they're the ones that rank us. So
yeah,
we'll do
that matter.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've got an interesting question here about what are the key metrics to focus on if you have a news publisher site with audio streaming, which is quite interesting. Hopefully you wouldn't have too much imagery, but yeah, any thoughts on that? Audio streaming.
In terms of Core Web Vitals, or then I don't think there's any. Probably first input delay might become bigger because you need to be able to activate the audio stream. So if you get to a page and it's rendered and you've got the sort of podcast image and you click play and nothing happens, then that's a really poor user experience. So that might be one of the biggest ones for audio streaming. But having said that, you are always going to have an LCP and potentially layout shift as well. So even though you might be filling the rest of your audio site with just some simple text here or bits and pieces there just to make everything look pretty, that prettiness may actually interfere with all your other metrics. But obviously, outside of page speed, you want to be looking at how well that audio plays and, the server response times, those kind of things, which Google aren't really going to look at that as a ranking factor. That's much more about, if I click play on your audio and it stutters, then I might go somewhere else for my audio needs. Google aren't going to necessarily take any notice of that, but certainly in terms of repeat business, your customers will.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. I think you mentioned the Chrome user experience report a little bit earlier. I would definitely recommend anyone looking into this use that data because that's actual user data rather than just being pinged by any one of these tools. So it will actually show you users' interaction and the kinds of issues that they're seeing. Because I think with speed, there's a really interesting concept about, you can make it super fast, or you can make it look like it's super fast. And that's when you get things like lazy loading and stuff that's happening somewhere else. So it's all about that kind of perception. Riley, do you use any of these kind of perception techniques on your site?
Unfortunately, no. Again, like I said, our site is kind of old and in-house, it takes us a while to get around to fixing things, even after we figure out what the problem is. I kind of want to. I want to implement those things, but not yet.
Fair. How about you, Steve? Any cool examples?
So lazy loading, that kind of thing is really important for websites. I think it ties in with when you look at LCP, it's kind of this imperfect measurement of page speed because the problem that they've had in the past is saying, and we have this problem when we're talking to clients about it and say Google have scored your page really badly for page speed. And when somebody gets it up on their mobile phone and it's there almost instantly. And it's because Google have usually judged page speed on the last thing to load. So if you've got some heavy script that it doesn't matter, I'm browsing away on the page and this thing's loading in the background and I don't notice it, and who cares about that bit of script? So LCP is that sort of, okay, well, if it's the largest, sort of pixel wide and deep item on the page, we'll count that as a really good indicator of how quickly your page is loading. And the more that you can do things like lazy loading and preloading of scripts, preloading of images, or setting those priorities of when things load in, so that really you're giving the user as much of an experience really quickly. And that's where Google are trying to move us. And I think that's the perfect way to do it, because some pages have huge things that they need to load just for the functionality of something they're trying to deliver. But if it doesn't really impact my experience of the page, then why should we be judging that page as loading slow when I've not noticed it at all?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really interesting concept when you talk about page speed, because we're only looking at the bit that's loading in the screen in that moment. Anything can be happening off of there. We don't really care, as long as the thing that we're reading or looking at, that's fine. Everything else, defer it. I mean, Google's had deferring off-screen images as a metric for so long in Lighthouse. Do all of those things.
Absolutely.
So I guess one thing to wrap up with, if we're getting to the end of our hour, is like, who should be worrying about Chrome Web Tools? Who's this actually going to really impact and potentially hurt?
I mean, to a degree, I feel like we should all not worry about it. I don't think it's worth staying up at night over, but think about it at least. But I mean, it's not going to affect, like, if your content is good, that's really the core thing that needs to be. That's what Google says is one of their main factors. So these aren't, like Steve mentioned in his presentation, this isn't like the primary ranking factor. I think that sites that are already ranking decently and have good content and are up against competitors who also have good content, then this type of thing will be really important because it can edge you ahead in rankings. But also, if you're not ranking well and you have a lot of issues on your site, that can definitely help bump you up. So it kind of depends on your circumstance. Steve, what do you think?
Yeah, pretty much exactly the same. I think, if you're not ranking on page one and you get really good core web vitals, you're still not going to rank on page one. You should have spent your time on your content instead, or one of the other plethora of issues that you might have. I do think that if you're really highly competitive in your market sector, like we work with a few sites in the travel sector, for staycations, these kind of things. There's so much money in it, and the competition are right there and thereabouts, and you're never quite sure what's going to tip you into position one over them. Your content's great, their content's great. You've got teams of people, you've got banks of servers. Everything seems perfect. But then, so if your core web vitals are better than theirs, then yes, I think that could win you that number one spot. Otherwise, I would put this very much in along the lines of other technical fixes that you need to look at on your website. But for really competitive areas, it could give you an edge.
Yeah, absolutely, completely. As most things, like when you're getting really competitive and you think, I've done everything, like these are all the things that you can be ticking off that list. And Sean has just said something about speed UX on e-commerce websites. If you have an e-commerce website and your site is slow, it can really hurt your bottom line. So use these metrics to empower you, particularly like Riley, if you're in-house and you're trying to get things done and trying to improve and make a case for yourself. Use these red line graphs and say, this is what we need to fix to improve the speed on this site. Look at this horrible red line, the orange line. Don't look at the green line, that one's fine. But yeah, these tools are made by Google to empower us and to demystify some things. So absolutely use them to your advantage. Awesome. Well, we're coming to the end of this very lovely webinar. Thank you both for joining me. This has been super, super interesting. Steve, thank you for presenting.
Thank you.
For answering all the questions. It's been an absolute pleasure. Any closing statements for anyone on the questions?
I don't think so. Just thank you for everybody who's still with us. Thanks, Paige, for being a great host. And yeah, I hope people go away, have a look at it, try not to get confused by anything, you know, and just delve around in your websites if you're a bit of a technical geek like me. Hours of fun.
It is. And can people tweet you, Steve?
Potentially, no. Yes. I don't know what my Twitter handle is. You know, that's a young person's game. But yeah, you can email me at Spike. It's steve@spike.digital. And I'm sure somewhere on a webpage there will be my Twitter handle.
My Twitter is @RileyE.Irvin, and you can feel free to tweet me questions, and maybe I can find Steve as well on Twitter.
Yeah, we'll just move
tweet me. I check it every 6 months. I'll be fine.
So you'll be checking it as things go live. Perfect. Absolutely brilliant. And yeah, my Twitter handle is @PaigeHobart. Super easy. My name's on the screen. But yeah, thank you all for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you.